Imagine a world without the invisible hand of markets guiding resources to their most valued uses. A world where prices didn't adjust to reflect scarcity, where individuals couldn't pursue their self-interest, and where the fundamental questions of what to produce and how to distribute goods remained unsolved puzzles. This was the economic wilderness that neoclassical economists sought to illuminate through mathematical precision and elegant theory. Today, we explore the profound intellectual revolution that shaped modern economic thought and continues to influence policy decisions affecting billions of lives worldwide. The story of neoclassical economics begins in the aftermath of the classical period dominated by Adam Smith, David Ricardo, and John Stuart Mill. By the 1870s, a remarkable intellectual convergence was taking place across Europe. Three economists working independently, William Stanley Jevons in England, Carl Menger in Austria, and Leon Walras in Switzerland, were simultaneously developing a revolutionary approach to economic analysis that would come to be known as the marginal revolution. What made their work revolutionary was a fundamental shift in focus. While classical economists like Smith and Ricardo had concentrated on the total or average utility of goods and the costs of production, these new thinkers examined the significance of the marginal unit, the value of having just one more or one less of something. This seemingly simple conceptual shift would transform economic theory forever. Jevons, a polymath who had worked as a gold assayer in Australia before becoming an economist, published The Theory of Political Economy in 1871. In it, he argued that value depends entirely upon utility, specifically the utility derived from the last unit consumed. This directly challenged the labor theory of value championed by classical economists. As Jevons himself wrote, "Repeated reflection and inquiry have led me to the somewhat novel opinion that value depends entirely upon utility." Meanwhile, in Vienna, Carl Menger was developing similar ideas. His 1871 Principles of Economics established what would become the Austrian School of Economics. Menger emphasized the subjective nature of value, the worth of an object being determined not by the labor required to produce it, but by its ability to satisfy human wants. As he eloquently put it, value is therefore nothing inherent in goods, no property of them, but merely the importance that we first attribute to the satisfaction of our needs. The third pioneer, Leon Walras, took the mathematical approach furthest. Teaching at the University of Lausanne, Walras developed a sophisticated model of general equilibrium, showing how prices in interconnected markets simultaneously adjust to equate supply and demand across an entire economy. His Elements of Pure Economics, published between 1874 and 1877, employed differential calculus to describe economic relationships with unprecedented mathematical rigor. The intellectual scaffolding erected by these thinkers was further developed and refined by Alfred Marshall at Cambridge University. Marshall's monumental Principles of Economics, first published in 1890 and revised through 8 editions until 1920, synthesized classical and marginal approaches. He introduced concepts like consumer and producer surplus, elasticity, and the crucial distinction between short-run and long-run analysis. Perhaps most famously, Marshall created the supply and demand diagram, those intersecting curves that have tortured generations of economics students ever since. Marshall's work was marked by his insistence on careful, measured analysis. "Nature does not make leaps," he wrote, emphasizing the importance of examining marginal changes. His methodical approach gave neoclassical economics its mature form. As Marshall explained, the element of time is the center of the chief difficulty of almost every economic problem. By the early 20th century, neoclassical economics had become the dominant paradigm. At its core were several foundational principles: methodological individualism, rational utility maximization, marginal analysis, and general equilibrium theory. Methodological individualism meant focusing on individual decision-makers rather than broad social classes. This was a significant departure from classical economics, which often analyzed the economy in terms of landlords, capitalists, and workers. Instead, neoclassicals examined how individuals, whether consumers, workers, or firm managers, make choices under constraints. The assumption of rational utility maximization posited that individuals act to maximize their satisfaction given their limited resources. Consumers allocate spending to maximize utility, while firms arrange production to maximize profits. This framework proved extraordinarily versatile for modeling economic behavior across diverse contexts. Marginal analysis, examining the effects of incremental changes, became the standard analytical tool. Whether discussing the utility from one more unit of consumption, the productivity of one more worker, or the cost of one more unit of output, neoclassical economists focused on these marginal values to explain economic decisions. Finally, general equilibrium theory sought to understand how all markets in an economy simultaneously clear, with prices adjusting until the quantity supplied equals the quantity demanded across all goods and services. This holistic perspective distinguished neoclassical economics from earlier partial equilibrium approaches. The power of this theoretical framework was dramatically demonstrated during a debate that erupted in the 1920s and 1930s. Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek argued that centrally planned economies would inevitably fail because they lacked the price mechanism needed to efficiently allocate resources. Without market prices reflecting relative scarcity, they contended, central planners would have no way to determine which goods should be produced or how production should be organized. Opposing them, economists like Oscar Lange and Abba Lerner proposed market socialism, a system where state-owned enterprises would be instructed to follow pricing rules mimicking competitive markets. This socialist calculation debate highlighted the central importance of price theory in neoclassical analysis and foreshadowed later real-world economic experiments. The Great Depression of the 1930s posed a serious challenge to neoclassical orthodoxy. With unemployment reaching 25% in the United States and similar levels across other industrialized nations, the theory's prediction that markets would naturally tend toward full employment seemed flatly contradicted by reality. Into this breach stepped John Maynard Keynes.
Do you like to dig deeper? Political economy is full of powerful ideas. You're right in the thick of it. Insightful, thought-provoking, expanding every step of the way. From Adam Smith and the rise of capitalism to Marx's bold critique, mercantilism, Keynesian economics, neoliberalism, and more. Or we explore it all, clearly and from every angle. Keep the momentum going. Check the links, dive deeper, and subscribe for more.
Keynes's 1936 masterwork, The General Theory of Employment, Interest, and Money, argued that aggregate demand could remain persistently deficient, trapping economies in prolonged recessions. He advocated government intervention, particularly fiscal policy, to stimulate demand when private spending faltered. As Keynes famously wrote, "In the long run, we are all dead." Economists set themselves too easy, too useless a task if in tempestuous seasons they can only tell us that when the storm is past, the ocean is flat again. The Keynesian challenge prompted neoclassical economists to refine and extend their models. Paul Samuelson's 1947 Foundations of Economic Analysis provided a sophisticated mathematical reformulation of neoclassical theory. Samuelson, the first American to win the Nobel Prize in Economics, showed how optimizing behavior could be represented using the tools of mathematical optimization and comparative statics. By the 1950s, what emerged was a neoclassical synthesis that incorporated Keynesian macroeconomic insights within a fundamentally neoclassical framework. This synthesis dominated mainstream economics for decades, with economists like John Hicks, Franco Modigliani, and Robert Solow developing models that married Keynesian short-run analysis with neoclassical long-run equilibrium. The neoclassical approach received further refinement through the Chicago School, led by figures like Milton Friedman and George Stigler. Friedman's 1953 essay, The Methodology of Positive Economics, argued that economic theories should be judged by their predictive power rather than the realism of their assumptions. This methodological position provided intellectual cover for simplified models making strong assumptions about rationality and perfect information. Friedman also mounted a powerful monetarist critique of Keynesian economics, arguing that inflation was always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon, and that attempts to use monetary policy to manage unemployment would ultimately fail. His empirical work with Anna Schwartz in A Monetary History of the United States provided historical evidence supporting these claims. The 1960s and 1970s saw further developments as economists like Kenneth Arrow and Gerard Debreu formalized general equilibrium theory with unprecedented mathematical rigor. Their work established precise conditions under which competitive markets yield efficient outcomes, the first fundamental theorem of welfare economics, while also identifying market failures that could justify government intervention. The stagflation of the 1970s, with high unemployment and high inflation occurring simultaneously, posed another challenge to mainstream economics. This led to the emergence of new classical macroeconomics, spearheaded by Robert Lucas. Lucas argued that rational expectations would undermine the effectiveness of systematic monetary or fiscal policy. In his view, only unanticipated policy changes could affect real variables like output and employment. The rational expectations revolution transformed macroeconomics, leading to dynamic stochastic general equilibrium (DSGE) models that now form the backbone of modern macroeconomic analysis. These sophisticated models incorporate rational, forward-looking agents making optimal decisions over time in an uncertain environment. Meanwhile, Gary Becker was extending neoclassical analysis to areas previously considered outside the economic realm. His work applied economic reasoning to family formation, crime, discrimination, and human capital development. As Becker put it, the combined assumptions of maximizing behavior, market equilibrium, and stable preferences, used relentlessly and unflinchingly, form the heart of the economic approach. The 1980s witnessed the rise of neoliberalism, a political movement that drew heavily on neoclassical economic theory to advocate market-oriented reforms. Leaders like Ronald Reagan in the United States and Margaret Thatcher in the United Kingdom implemented policies of deregulation, privatization, and tax cuts, justified by neoclassical models emphasizing efficiency and individual choice. However, the neoclassical paradigm was not without critics. Institutional economists like Thorstein Veblen had long criticized its abstract, ahistorical nature. Behavioral economists like Daniel Kahneman, Amos Tversky, and Richard Thaler identified systematic deviations from rational choice theory in actual human behavior. Feminist economists questioned its neglect of unpaid care work and gender dynamics. Ecological economists highlighted its inadequate treatment of natural resources and environmental externalities. Despite these criticisms, neoclassical economics showed remarkable resilience. Rather than rejecting the challenges, it often absorbed them through theoretical extensions. Information economics developed by Joseph Stiglitz, George Akerlof, and Michael Spence examined how asymmetric information affects market outcomes. New institutional economics pioneered by Ronald Coase, Douglas North, and Oliver Williamson incorporated institutions and transaction costs into neoclassical models. The 2008 global financial crisis prompted renewed scrutiny of neoclassical assumptions, particularly in macroeconomics. Critics pointed to the failure of mainstream models to anticipate the crisis or incorporate financial instability. As former Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan admitted in congressional testimony, "I found a flaw in the model that I perceived is the critical functioning structure that defines how the world works." In response, economists have developed models with more realistic financial sectors, incorporated insights from behavioral economics, and paid greater attention to inequality and distributional concerns. Yet the core neoclassical framework, with its emphasis on optimization, equilibrium, and efficiency, continues to dominate economic analysis and education. Today, neoclassical economics remains the foundation of most undergraduate and graduate economics curricula worldwide. Its analytical tools are applied to pressing issues from climate change to healthcare reform, from international trade to technological innovation. Its influence extends far beyond academic departments to central banks, finance ministries, international organizations, and corporate boardrooms. The neoclassical vision of markets as powerful coordination mechanisms, prices as signals of relative scarcity, and individual choice as the wellspring of economic activity continues to shape how we understand and organize our economic lives. As we navigate the complexities of the 21st century global economy, with its technological disruptions, environmental challenges, and persistent inequalities, the intellectual legacy of Jevons, Menger, Walras, Marshall, and their successors remains profoundly relevant. Whether celebrated as a triumph of scientific reasoning or criticized as an ideological construct, neoclassical economics represents one of the most ambitious and influential intellectual projects in modern history. An attempt to understand the complex web of human economic interactions through elegant mathematical models built on a foundation of methodical analysis and logical deduction. As we look to the future, the challenge is to preserve the analytical power of neoclassical economics while addressing its limitations, to build economic theories and policies that recognize both the remarkable coordination achieved by markets and their tendency toward instability, inequality, and environmental degradation. This ongoing evolution of economic thought continues a tradition of critical refinement that has characterized the field since those path-breaking works of the 1870s first revolutionized our understanding of value, price, and economic behavior.
We've got some amazing content coming your way. Subscribe now so you're first in line for fresh insights and all the good stuff you won't want to miss.